Hey everybody, this is Matt from Matt's Fantasy Book Reviews, and I am back with my monthly recap. So before we go into all the data that I've accumulated throughout the month and the books that I've read, I want to start with giving you a little bit of a channel update. So this has been a great month. The channel continues to grow pretty steadily. I am now at about 4,300 subs, which is like 4,000 more than I thought I'd be at this point. So thank you everybody for continuing to join along on my reading adventure. I've made a lot of progress, I think, on the quality of my videos. And so I've been playing a lot with the new equipment that I've got, and I think I have my color balance all right. Apparently there is a white balance button that I did not know about, which really got things looking like I'm not a zombie, which I appreciate. I don't really want to come off like the undead, even though it's kind of cool, but yeah, I like you seeing that I actually have color in my face. I started a Discord, not this month, but right at the end of last month, and that is really going strong. I think there's like 120 or 130 people in there, a lot of active discussions. It's really fun to be able to talk spoilers with you all, because on this channel I only talk non-spoilers, but I have a lot of thoughts about these books that I can't say on here. So it's been a lot of fun reading along with books. I put out like a huge list of the books that I'm going to be reading for the next several months so people can follow along if they want. There's quite a few people that are reading the same books I am. So being able to talk about them while I'm reading them or have people come on and want to talk spoilers with me has been a really fun thing. So if you haven't joined, please join. I'd love to chat with you about all the books that I'm reading or the books that you're reading. I just got a header made for the YouTube channel, and I want to thank the Discord for helping a lot with, especially one person on the Discord that really helped get that banner looking about 10 times better than my first draft. So yeah, I'm really excited about that. I actually look a little bit professional, which is weird because the previous image I had was just a image on my lame little phone of my bookcase. And so yeah, I'm looking a lot better. I've started doing a lot of graphics in my videos this month. So if you notice in my videos, I don't know if I'll do it on this one because of the format, but I throw in pictures that kind of scroll left to right or up to down or zooming in or zooming out to give you a little bit of a feel for what the artwork for that book is, or the fan art for those books. So you don't just have to stare at my face the entire time, which I think is really fun. I'm trying to learn a lot of little tricks on video editing. I don't want to spend a ton of time doing video editing, but it's nice to throw in a little graphics here and there. I've also made a lot of steady progress doing my top 100 videos. I think I'm up to the top 40 now. That has been a blast to shoot, in part because there's a lot of books that I haven't really got a chance to talk to you about that I've read a long time ago. So it's fun to kind of refresh my brain on those books and why I love them, and being able to talk really passionately with you about my favorite books of all time. So I can't wait to finish that out, and I suspect I'll finish it this month, or maybe, I'm not really good at math, but it might be the first week of the next month, but we'll see. And then finally, I have kind of figured out a model here for how I want to do the channel to continue the growth, but also doing videos that I love to do. And that is, continuing to do a video for every book that I read. And that's generally about 10 videos a month. But also, I always like to have one video kind of trending. And so I've kind of got a good sense about what those videos look like and what they are. So I kind of keep track of if my videos are still bringing in a lot of new viewers, and if I have videos that have totally died out, then I'll make another one that I kind of know is going to be a little bit more popular, and I'll let that one ride out until it gets to a low point, and then I'll start up another one that I know. Because the book reviews, while I do love making them, they don't bring a lot of new people to the channel. It's, top 10 lists, top 100 lists, fun little different videos that I can do, and I have a ton of backlogged ideas, so I can keep those pumping out for a really long time. And I've got a ton of fun things I want to bust out when the opportunity presents itself. So now let's move into my recap for the month and kind of summarizing the year up to this point. So this month I read a total of 9 books. I read about 3,900 pages, which is definitely down from my average. And there's a number of reasons for that. One is that I've just been very busy in my personal life. I coach my daughter's soccer team, and you've got 2 practices a week. You've got a game every weekend. There's a lot of just extracurricular activities that I've been doing. And the other is spending time on these videos does cut into some of my reading time. So that's still a lot of reading. It's just a little bit down from what my average is. I'm up to 93 books read this year, which is great. And then I am at a little over 51,000 pages read for the year. And my average score for the year is a little bit low for my norm, but I'm at 3.81 average score. And that's not so much that the average book I read is lower, it's really because a few books, a handful of books that I've read, I've given like a 1 or 2, and that really tanks the scores. So for the month, I have gotten 78,000 views on the YouTube channel, which is up significantly. Last month, which I thought was like a banner month, was 62,000. So I've got 16,000 more views than that, which is awesome. I have 11,200 hours spent on people watching videos this month, and that's up from 6,800. So a huge jump there, and that's mainly because I started doing some videos that are a lot longer, especially the top 100 list. I'm spending 45 minutes or so on each of those videos, and so that really bumps up the amount of time people are watching. The subscriptions I got was 1,200 this month, which is almost identical to what I got last month, so that's a wonderful, way bigger progress than I ever thought. And I imagine that's just going to peter out at some point, because it doesn't seem sustainable to be bringing in, 15,000 new subscribers a year. That's crazy, and not what I would expect to happen. So I suspect at some point I'll get down to that like 500 new a month, and that'll be my average. But we'll see, who knows. And then my #1 video for this month was a video called the Top 10 Most Underrated Fantasy Book Series. And that has 15,000 views, and that's still kind of climbing a little bit. Not fast, but it's climbing a little bit. And my #2 video got 13,000 views, and that was an overview of the 10 most popular fantasy book series. And then my 3rd most popular video was actually a video that I didn't make last month. It just continued to get views, and that got 5,400 views last month, and that was my favorite fantasy book of all time according to my favorite YouTubers. And so yeah, that just gets a regular amount of clicks every day, which is kind of cool. Not a huge amount, but it's still bringing in new viewers, which is great. So now let's go through the 9 books that I read this month, and I want to talk to you a little bit about them. So the first book that I finished was Mother of Learning, Arc 2. This is part of the Mother of Learning series by Domagoi Kuramaich. And I predicted that I would give this book a 4.5, and I ended up giving it a 5. I'm going to go ahead and say this was my biggest surprise of the month. And that's, 0.5 difference. That's not huge. But I really did think, if I was going to say, 4.5, is this book going to likely be higher or likely lower? I would have said, probably that or lower, because the first book was good. I give it a 4. And, I'm always optimistic. I'm a very optimistic reader. I think it's a lot more fun to be optimistic about books. This book blew me away. It was so much better than the first book in every way. If you're not familiar with this series, it's a web serial that's already done, and it's about a time loop. So this young adult or like older boy, I don't know how old he is, maybe like 17, 18. He goes to a mage school, and he finds himself in a time loop that he can't get out of. And not only is there a time loop, but there's also this impending disaster going to impact his country at the end of the time loop, which is a month long, or about a month long. And so he's trying to solve the time loop. He's also trying to figure out how to stop this horrible thing from happening. And so he doesn't want to stop the time loop before he finishes this, but he also wants to find out the mystery of it. So the mystery just slowly unraveling and figuring out who's involved in this and why and what's going on. It's been really fun. I'm not a big mystery reader, but the mystery here has really enthralled me, and I love everything about this book. And I really can't wait to finish this out in Arc 3. Arc 3, I think, is huge. It's like 1,000 pages, maybe more, and that'll wrap it up. So yeah, I'm super excited to finish this out. I don't know if I'm reading it in this coming month, but definitely by the end of the year. And I predicted that I would finish this book on the 1st of the month, and I did finish it on the 1st of the month. So the second book that I read this month was Making Money, and this is part of the Discworld series, and it is by the one and only Sir Terry Pratchett. And I predicted that I'd give it a 4, and I gave it a 4. And I also predicted that I would finish it on the 3rd of October, and I finished it on the 4th. And so it's kind of cheating to say I'll give it a 4, because I give most Discworld books a 4. And they fall into the same kind of formula for me. They're always funny, which is great. I love to laugh. You get points for that. They're written so well and intelligently, and I love that. And philosophical, all these positive things. But the plots almost never grip me. The plots are always par to subpar. And I know a lot of Discworld fans are going to say that's blasphemy, but for me, the plots are not the strong point of the book. They're just what needs to be there for the book to get to conclusion. But it's all about the writing quality and the comedy and the characters. And so, yeah, I thought this was good. It was part of the Industrial Revolution arc It's a smaller arc of the books. Discworld's split up into a lot of different arcs where you don't have to read them chronologically. In fact, I don't think you should. But this one is about this con artist that ends up in charge of various things. And in this book, he's in charge of the main national bank and has to figure out how to right-size it. And it's a fun parody on the banking industry, very ingenious writing, and in an overall decent plot. There's nothing that blew me away. So the third book that I read was Jade War. This is part of the Greenbone Saga trilogy, the second book in the trilogy, and this was by Fonda Lee. And I predicted a 5, I gave it a 5, and I predicted that I would finish it on the 7th, and I did finish it on the 7th. And this book is just, oh my gosh, this book's amazing. It's going to go down as one of my favorite, top 20 or so favorite books that I've ever read. It's incredible. I like to think of this series as like a Asian-inspired fantasy Godfather. And that's everything about this book just goes into what I just said. It's a wonderful series. The plot is so engaging. Now, I'm biased in that I happen to love mafia-style media. I love The Godfather. I like any movies that involve the mafia. If they're decent, I usually love them. I love The Godfather book. I thought it was amazing. And so this book was just right up my alley. Now, the first book I thought had some down parts to it. Even though I gave it a 5 out of 5, it was not as good as Jade War. Jade War took this building war in the first book and popped it off in the second. It is super diverged from anything Godfather-oriented other than it involves a mafia family trying to survive and trying to make that next jump up in their progression of their family and their criminal organization. And it's just everything about this book rocked. The characters were amazing. The plot was so good. The writing quality is great. Although I will say the fantasy elements were kind of weak, the Jade aspects and giving people powers was like, so-so. But yeah, this is a top tier book, and there's a reason that it's so popular. And if you haven't got on board with the Greenbone Saga, jump the gun. I'm always reticent to read these books that are the next big thing, the ones that win the major awards. I typically don't like them. But man, this one, I don't know if it got like major awards, but it is, the talked about book that's come out in the past 5 or 6 years, and I fully agree. The next book I read was Call of the Bone Ships, and this is part of the Tide Child trilogy by R.J. Barker. I predicted that I'd give it a 5. I did give it a 5, and I predicted that I would finish it on the 8th of October, and I finished it on the 10th. It took me a little while. And this will go down as my best book that I read for the month. And this was a wonderful month of reading. I gave mostly 4s and 5s, and it's just so good. It's one of my favorite books I've ever read. I think it's probably a top 10 favorite book of all time. Everything about it is wonderful. Every single thing about it's wonderful. If you're familiar with my review videos, I break things down into 5 different categories. And if I'll try to remember them right, but it's characters, world building, plot, fantasy elements, characters, and then I give a last little bonus category to my enjoyability. And every single one of those sub-genres got a 5. So it's a perfect book in my opinion. It's, without giving anything away, because it's the second in a trilogy, it follows this pirate ship. And I love pirate ships. I love fantasy books. When you blend them together, it's awesome. They're trying to hunt for these sea dragons that are bigger than life, bigger than a skyscraper kind of thing. And you've got these 2 rival nations that are in, battled together by trying to hunt these beasts. There's treachery. It's just so wonderfully written. Everything about this book series is awesome. I don't understand why this book series is not more popular than it is. I mean, you hear it talked about, but it's not talked about as like one of the greatest fantasy works of all time. And for me, it is. So if anything about you is interested by nautical books, man, you got to go get this book yesterday. It's amazing. And the first book's really good too, but this one really elevated it to new heights. The next book I read was Half the World, and this is part of the Shattered Sea trilogy by Joe Abercrombie, one of my favorite authors. And I predicted that I'd give this a 3 out of 5 because I didn't love the first one in the trilogy, and I gave this a 1 out of 5, did not finish. Hated the book. I predicted that I'd finish it on the 11th, and I finished it on the 10th, namely because I did not finish it. So I got a little bit of a bump on there on my prediction time slot. And yeah, I didn't like much about this book at all. I thought the first one was weak. mainly because my expectations were different. You know, I love Joe Abercrombie. He's this grimdark author who writes incredible characters, and this is a YA story. And I'm nothing against YA books. I love that they're a thing. I love that they get more people into fantasy. I think it's awesome. I hope my kids get into YA when they get to the right age. I will read it to them with gusto. But for me, it's not my thing. And so I didn't even realize that these were YA when I picked up the books, but I got sucked in. I thought the first one was not great, but the ending was awesome. This one, it just went in an entirely different direction. New characters, huge time jump, couldn't connect with them. When I talked about this recently in a video about the books that I don't love. And there's this immense relief you get when you drop a book that you're not liking, for me. And it takes kind of, I don't know, I don't want to say guts because reading doesn't take guts, but it's hard for me to quit a book. I feel like this need to finish. But when I drop one, I just get this huge sense of like calmness and like, man, I should have done that earlier. I'm so happy. I get to go to something that I enjoy. And yeah, I definitely got that here. And yeah, this book series is not for me. If you're into YA books, I think you'll probably love it because it's highly reviewed, and Joe Abercrombie is a great writer. The writing quality is very good. I just don't really like much else about the plot. The next book I read was Son of a Liche, and this is by Zachary Pike, the second book in the Dark Prophet trilogy. I think it's a trilogy. He hasn't finished the trilogy yet, but I think there's 3 books planned. I predicted that I'd give this book a 5 out of 5. I actually give it a 4.5, and I predicted I'd finish it on the 14th, and I finished it on the 16th. And I love this book. It's so good. It's not as good as the first one, and it definitely had some problems to it. You know, this is a book that is a satire in the realm of Terry Pratchett, and it's better than most Pratchett books, even though I love Pratchett. He's one of my favorite all-time authors, but this series is just ingenious. The author is so funny in how he writes. He does great satires about similar concepts that Terry Pratchett does. He doesn't write as philosophically, but he does write deep and hysterical, and I love it so much. But this book had some major lulls. You know, it felt like this book could have been 2 books. And I was talking about this on the Discord with some people, and that ultimately we kind of thought that, you know, the halfway point through the book really ends a storyline and goes to a new one. And splitting this up into 2 books and kind of fleshing out the story a little bit for both of them would have made for a much better series. But ultimately, it just kind of felt like it lacked something that the first book had. And so I love it. I highly suggest you read these books if you're a Pratchett fan. Check it out. You know, I think I've heard from so many Pratchett people about like, what should I read when I like Pratchett? And the answer typically is, yeah, you don't have anything else. He's the best. Well, Zachary Pike is your guy. He hasn't written a lot, but you got to pick up these 2 books. You just got to do it. Then I read Bloody Rose, and this is the second in the Banned trilogy, and there's only 2 books out so far, and this is by Eames. And I predicted a 5 out of 5. I gave it a 5 out of 5. Predicted I'd finish it on the 19th, and I finished it on the 21st. And this book rocks. The first book, which you may be familiar with, is Kings of the Wild. It's an immensely popular book, and not like one of the titans of the fantasy industry, but in the past several years, you know, it got a lot of attention. And I think it won that indie fantasy award thing that Mark Lawrence does, and it deserves all the accolades. This book was recommended to me by Patrick Leo. I had him on a month ago to suggest a book for me, or 2 months ago, and he suggested Kings of the Wild. And it's one of the greatest books I've ever read. It's so good. But I've heard from so many people that this book is a step down. And while it is, it's small and almost unnoticeable. They're very different books, though. You can't go into the second book feeling like you're going to get just the first one again. The first one is an amazing story because it involves these older characters that are, you know, here for one last hurrah. And I love that. I haven't read much fantasy that involved older protagonists. I love it. It was very funny and just awesome. It's not like hugely epic, though. It has epic moments, but the second book toned down the funny a little bit, and it toned up the epicness huge. It is a amazing, more classic, epic fantasy story, and I love those kind of books, and this is amazing. It's so good. I love everything about it. It parodies kind of 80s rock and roll, not a direct parody, it's just tons of names are borrowed from it. Kind of the overall theme of the book goes towards that. An amazing amount of 80s references where if you're an 80s kid, you know, you'll get a lot of them, and a ton of them will blow over your head. I would be impressed if somebody got them all. But when you pick them up, you just get this little smile to your face. You don't need to be into 80s rock to like this book, but it helps. And yeah, this book series is just incredible. You got to check it out. Then I read Jade Legacy. This is the last in the Greenbone Saga trilogy by Fonda Lee. I gave it a 5 out of 5. I predicted a 5 out of 5. Predicted I'd finish it on the 23rd, and I was a day late, got it on the 24th. And yeah, I already talked about this series. I don't want to go into too much more depth, but it finished out the story in amazing fashion. I don't know if I like the second one more than the third or the third more than the second. Ultimately, I think they're about the same for me. I hear a lot of people that have different opinions. Almost everybody agrees that the second and third are better than the first, but there's a lot of debate about which one's better, and I can't decide. They're different books. What I did love about the third one, though, is that it covered like multiple decades. I think 3, or the better part of 3. And every so often they had this huge time jumps, and you'd see characters immensely age. You got to see the next generation of characters come into their own. And it was just an amazing writing choice that worked so well for me and that felt unique and fresh. And it was a great way to keep the plot moving without having to keep the series. You know, it could have not had those jumps and just drawn things out, but it just kept the pace going along. And I love everything about that choice, and I wish more authors would have the guts to do what Fonda Lee he did here. Now, I don't know if they'll execute it as well, because Fonda Lee is amazing, but it's great, 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 great. This trilogy is an all-time great for me. And the last book that I read, I finished it today, and it is Flowers of Esthelm. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. It's a weird spelling. And this is part of The Wandering Inn, the third book in The Wandering Inn by Pirateaba. I predicted a 5 out of 5. I did give it a 5 out of 5. And I predicted I'd finish it on the 28th, and I was 3 days late, finishing it on the 31st. And I can't talk too much about the series and what's gone up to this point, because these are enormous books, like 1,000 to 2,000 pages each book. And so much has happened that I can't really talk about it. But in short, what this series is about a young woman who is living a normal life on Earth and suddenly finds herself transported to like a Dungeons and Dragons type world of that old tech with all these different races of creatures that are sentient, and she finds herself running an inn. And she and others have this system where they're literally leveling up and getting stronger. They get different classes based on the jobs that they do. They're getting different powers that can power them up. It's so addicting and fun. Everything about this book is just wonderful and fun. The author is getting better and better as the series goes along in writing quality. The third book compared to the first book, even though I love the first book, is just immensely different in the way that it's written in all the right ways. The plot is getting huge. It's covering multiple continents. I can't wait to see where this story goes. It's the longest fantasy series of all time by a long shot, and it gets bigger and bigger. I think it gets bigger by like 60,000 words per week, which is nuts because the average novel is like 100,000 words. So, you know, the better part of a novel is written every single week without fail. And it's crazy that the author can pull this off. It's so fun. More people need to get into The Wandering Inn, and it's free. Go to thewanderinginn.com. I think that's it. Just Google Wandering Inn, and every single chapter that's ever been written is just sitting there free. In fact, it's better to read it on the computer than it is on Kindle, not only because it's free, but there's all these different color choices that are used to indicate really impactful moments that happen. There's this hidden text you can hover over, which is really cool. So if you're okay with reading on a computer, it's even better. And so there's so many reasons to read this, but man, how often are you going to find quality writing that is openly free? So awesome. Check it out. This author, Pirateaba, is amazing. So for the last part of my video, I want to go through my book haul. I am very open with authors that want to send me their books that I may not have time to read your book because I have an immense backlog of books that I'm trying to get through, and I'm very OCD in the order that I go through them and have my books planned out for like a year plus in advance. But I do promise them that I will share their book on screen with you if they send it to me. And I think word's getting out on that because I am getting a ton of books sent to me. And so I want to go through and share those with you and describe a little bit about what the book is all about. So the first book that I got is Path of the Half Moon, and this is by Vince Bailey. He actually sent me 3 books. So there is Path of the Half Moon, there is Courses of the Cursed, and there is Merging Paths. And I think this is a trilogy, and I don't want to ruin anything about the later parts of these books, but I do want to read you the blurb on the first book. So, Vince Bailey's award-winning Path of the Half Moon is a paranormal, historical fiction tale set in a remote detention facility for wayward boys in the early 60s. Curtis is an African-American youth whose character and physical endurance are tested by a murderous inmate and a century-old Native American curse. The first book in the Curtis Jefferson series, Path of the Half Moon, presents an edgy and thrilling escape from the ordinary. So the next book that I got sent to me was The Collector's Offer, Making of Elements. And this is by Joseph 𝗕liche. I'm not saying that correctly, but that is what I'm going to do. And here is the blurb. The kingdom of Eldertude is dying. Thangrath's curse continues to eat away at the people, turning them into something far more sinister. All attempts of contamination have failed. Alliances have broken down to the point where war now looms on the horizon. Faith in King Vidal's reign has dwindled. Even his council is plotting against him. The collector, the richest man in the borrowed lands, delivers a message, a promise of salvation, but it comes with heavy price. The king sends his only son, Prince Xander, in a search for answers. Others in the kingdom are merely trying to survive. Famine and poverty are rife. Many have the added burden of hiding their sick, because if discovered, they are sent beyond the gates of Helrus into the zones. Alone in the desert, the Yellow Templar continue their rituals. They worship the tomb of a demon. Whilst gathering more slaves, if the seal is broken, the world will fall into a new nightmare. Then I got sent Seekers, The Winds of Change, and this is by Troy Knowlton. And this is a very long recap, but I'm going to only read the first paragraph because it is very long. Chaotic, relentless winds of change are blowing through the world of Tirana, tearing through not just the landscape, but the minds of those who inhabit it. Few feel the effects of the gale as much as Tyrus and Orin, who find themselves caught in the middle of its turbulent fury. As 2 seekers, artifact-acquiring agents of the mighty Agran Empire, they've become accustomed to conflict. Still, nothing could prepare them for the world-changing events about to unfold when one of the Empire's leaders, their own personal master, finds himself at the wrong end of an assassin's bow. Galvanized by the incident, the pair separates in order to uncover the truth behind the terrible act and find the mysterious relic called the Conduit, which is somehow connected to all of it. Then I got another trilogy. This is by Michael Schultheis, and it is Book 1 of the Rostival Saga, The Altar of Fate. I also have here The Spiral of Destiny, and then I also have The Third Way of My God. And, oh, this is a short one. I enjoy short summaries. Rostival lusts for the warrior's path, the spoils of victory, and an ancient power that could help him lead his tribe to greatness. Denied the right to inherit his father's chieftaincy by the iron-fisted grandfather, Rostival knows he must forsake the steppe-lands of his home and travel across the great desert to the fabled lands of the south, a world of palaces and pleasure gardens, living gods, beautiful women, and the slave girls he needs to reward his warband. His journey leads him to a warrior mystic and a slave girl who could help him master a dangerous spirit at an ancient altar, an artifact of the vanished Shaper race. But crossing the desert may be easier than escaping his grandfather, who is sending an army and his own champion to master the spirit and claim the fateful power of the ancient Shaper altar. All right, and then I got a super short one. I've never seen like short little fantasy books, but it's pretty cool. And it's by Aaron Hunt Ratto, and it is The Beast of Basque, and it is very small. When Alaris Linden dies at the beginning of a tale, you know you're in for something new. The Beast of Basque tracks Alaris's descent into the Elva realm, where she becomes the champion of the Raven Queen. Assisting her is Odwin, the gender-fluid impish herald. On her quest, Alaris meets Creston Duhaldi, a former military captain. And what task does the Raven Queen assign? Slay a two-faced beast that preys on the souls of children. Only tasks aren't always as straightforward as they seem, nor are the reasons for them, nor the comrade Alaris meets along the way. Enjoy The Beasts of Bask, Adventure 1 of the Tales of Raven's Daughter. All right, we're almost to the end here. I told you I got a lot. And this one is by J.D. Mitchell, and it is Springtide Harvest. Haskell wants to be a legend, a hero like his grandfather who broke the orcish hordes. Froba just wants to survive and stay ahead of her cruel master, a corrupt guard who makes her gift naive adventurers. Froba knows what Haskell doesn't, that the deck is stacked against them, and there are no heroes left in the world. Aided by a cheerful band of misfits, Haskell must survive a monstrous infested forest, and the exploitive, treasure-hunting guild founded to clear it, while Froba must decide where her loyalties lie, with her carefree mark or cunning master, if fierce woodland monsters don't devour them first. Then finally, I got a super cool book that I actually think I'm going to read because of how awesome it is. It's like a collector's edition. It is beautiful, and it's called 𝐒𝐨𝐜𝐢𝐚𝐥, and it's by two authors, J. Davis and K. Grierson. And I looked up a little bit, and this is two authors, or two illustrators who sent illustrations and some stories back and forth throughout years. It's for fun. And then eventually they said, let's turn this into a book. And this is what they turned up. It's got a Kickstarter. If the link is available by the time I put this out, I'll put it out. But if not, I'll share it when I get it. But this is just beautiful. It comes with this awesome bookmark. I love when books have their little bookmarks in it. It's a hard copy. They signed it to Matt. Happy reading. Love the signatures in here. But there's just illustrations abound in here. Just like this beautiful colored map. But every chapter or so, it's got this beautiful, I've got my colors messed up here. But it's just everywhere you look is these just beautiful pictures abound. And it's just so cool to see a book with this much passion. It just looks beautiful. And yeah, they also sent some pictures from the book, just larger. It's so cool, all this extra stuff you get when you get this book. I love it, and I want to read the back to you. When a demon murders the regent, young King 𝗕lms leaves his island palace and sails north to conquer a frozen wilderness, rich in resources his people have squandered, and of course hunt down the demon. 𝗕lms has no doubt he'll prevail. After all, he is great like his ancestors. But the land is already home to half-wild barbarians led by an immortal priest, who are used to weather more savage than any warrior. With a court losing confidence and a wife set on keeping the crown no matter whose head it sits on, the decisions at home prove the greater danger. With mounting threats on all sides, 𝗕lms wins his empire, but his arrogance leaves him cursed and trapped in the north. Without his armies, his magic, or even his own name, 𝗕lms must face his selfishness and irresponsibility to preserve what truly matters, his young son's life. And when I researched a little bit of this, it kind of reminded me a little bit of Malazan, not because of what the book's about, but that you had this larger story that eventually got turned into a book. And it's cool because they didn't know exactly where they wanted to start the story. There was a ton of different places they could start, but the author said, this is the spot we want to start. Let's go here. And I love this idea that there's this bigger world that's going on here, and just unlimited tales that could be told. And yeah, I hope that I like this book as much as I am looking forward to reading it. But yeah, I can't wait to read it and share it all with you. So that is my monthly recap. It's my longest one yet by far. If you're at this point, kudos. Thanks for staying with me. I appreciate it. And as always, happy reading to you.